The ever-coveted 4-tier dumbbell rack with the sweet sliding drawer-style lower shelf. Now, if we're talking about a buy once, cry once situation, I will be the first to tell you this thing is worth a lot more than 4 tiers. That was cheesy, but whatever, here we are. Once again, I never imagined myself making a video to talk about a dumbbell rack. Here I am, and at least it's a pretty cool one, right? It's expensive, it is a high quality piece of equipment. I couldn't tell you how it performs because I don't own dumbbells. That's another conversation for another day. Today, what I want to do is talk about what you should expect upon delivery if you were to purchase such a thing, and also the assembly process. Now, full disclosure, I totally suck at documenting my life in a way that is conducive to making those super helpful and informative step-by-step walkthrough instructional videos with the cool edits and whatnot, like you might expect to see from, say, Kaizen DIY or someone like that, but I think I can throw some shit together and do a pretty bang-up job here on the back end. And if by the end of the video you have more questions than I've been able to answer, well, drop them in the comments so I can know what needs to be addressed. So, delivery was fast for me. I was originally quoted an ETA of 52 weeks. A few days later, I was notified that some changes were made to the supply chain logistics. They thought they may be able to cut that time in half, but as it would turn out, I actually received mine in about 8 weeks. I feel like that may be an outlier, so I wouldn't necessarily expect that all the time, but it was a pleasant surprise nonetheless. It arrived very well packaged and crated via R&L carriers, and I began the disassembly process almost immediately. Doing so required a 9/16" socket, an electric drill or impact wrench, a pry bar or something similar, and a Phillips bit for your drill or screw gun or whatever you want to call it. To disassemble the crate, you really only have to remove the 4 pieces of 1x4 that go across the top, and then of course one of the ends of the crate. You'll use the pry bar and the screwdriver to do that, and the 9/16" socket to remove the big silver bolts that hold the rack components to each end of the small crate itself. Once you remove all the parts from the crate, it's probably best if you have a fairly large or open space to kind of lay everything out. And of course, the entire process would be easiest if you had at least one other person to help hold things in place and things like that. Now, I didn't really have that luxury because I don't have friends, so I kind of put the pieces about where I thought they would go, and I pretty much built it in place, and I managed to get it all together without assistance. So it can be done, and I'll talk you through the scary parts, but I'm not responsible if you drop something on your foot like a dipshit. However you decide to lay yours out, the orientation of most of the rack components are mostly self-explanatory with a couple of exceptions. The larger frame pieces go with the sticker side out. The uprights will face toward the back, and the center piece of the frame sits so the uprights are facing forward. No brainer there, but on the other hand, make sure to pay attention to the drawers as well as the remaining dumbbell shelves themselves, as these are slightly nuanced. Specifically, as you're facing the dumbbell rack, the bottom drawer that goes on the right-hand side will have countersunk holes in the front and back of the left-hand side of the drawer frame. The 2 middle shelves will have additional holes in the center for mounting it on the center support where the top shelf will not. And of course, unless you really want to fuck with people, you want to make sure that they're installed so the holes for the numbered plates are toward the front of the rack. Okay, so the rack components are all laid out, but we aren't quite ready yet. For starters, I think it helps to identify which nuts and bolts and washers go where, so you can kind of have those ready when and where you need them. And the first thing I did was took the bright shiny steel numbered plates and the stainless Phillips screws and the 7/16" nuts, and I set those to the side. Those are going to go on very last, so you don't need those for a while, and they're also the easiest to differentiate from the rest. Next, as you're staring at the pile of nuts and bolts, look for these round head Allen bolts that look like this. Okay, there are 4 of them, and lucky for you, all of the remaining nuts and the washers are the exact same size, so just grab the round head Allen bolts, 4 washers, and 4 nuts, and set those in a pile. Those are going to go along the center of the rack, but not yet, so don't get ahead of yourself. After you've set those aside, looking back at your pile of nuts and bolts, find the 3 screws that look like this. In case anyone gives a shit, these are called flathead socket cap screws. They should really stand out among the others because they have a flat top and kind of a cone shape on the underside of the head. Set those next to the bottom right-hand drawer, which we identified earlier. It's the one with the countersunk holes. You'll need those in a few minutes when we attach the drawers to the center support frame. And now the tricky part. Just kidding. If you're actually following these steps, you'll notice the remaining screws have the same heads, but with different shaft lengths. there's no need to measure or anything like that. Just sort them into two piles, a long one and a short one. And when you run out of screws, make sure you have 12 long ones and 6 short ones. Now for that big pile of washers and nuts you have left over, each one of the long bolts will get 2 washers and 1 nut. Each one of the remaining 6 washers will go to one of the shorter bolts. I know, that sounds like a word problem from the ACTs. It's really not that difficult. But at this point, I'd like to go ahead and just put 1 washer on every bolt. It makes it easier to keep up with and saves some time when you're actually assembling the rack, which we're going to do next. But real quick, I just want to make sure you understand that you're going to have 12 loose washers left over. Those are going to go on the long bolt right before you install the nut, so no need to put those on the bolt just yet. Just keep them together so you have them when you need those. The 12 longer bolts, along with those thick steel oval plates with the 2 holes in them, are going to hold the long shelves to the left and right sides of the frame, and the 6 shorter bolts will be used to attach the drawers to the bottom of the left and right side of the frames. Okay. So you've got all your shit laid out. You're wondering how the fuck you're going to put this bitch together without tools, because I might have forgot to mention, I don't remember if I mentioned, did I mention what tools you'll need? See, I don't know. I told you I suck at this. For the actual assembly, you'll need 2 Allen wrenches, a 5/16 inch and a 7/36, a 5/16 inch and a 7/32 inch Allen wrench. God, I can't speak, man. You'll also need a 9/16 inch socket and a 7/16 inch socket and a Phillips screwdriver. Okay, now you're ready to assemble. Start by installing the rubber foot pads. There are 6 of these and you'll put 1 on each foot of the frame. Pretty simple, right? I like to put them on so that you can see the P, but that's not a requirement unless you are as particular as I am, in which case I probably don't even have to mention it. Once these are on, you'll install the right and left drawers to the right, left, and the center support frames using the 6 short Allen bolts going through the bottom of the outer support frames, and the 3 flathead socket screws are going to go through the center support frame from the left-hand side of the right-hand drawer. That sounds a lot more confusing when I say it out loud than what it actually is, but regardless, don't tighten these down just yet. Hand tight is all you need for now. And with the bottom shelves installed to the left, right, and center frame supports, you're now ready to attach the low shelf. As mentioned earlier, there are 2 shelves that are identical in that they both have slotted holes in the center to allow the round head Allen screw to attach to the center support frame. So grab either one of those and just make sure to pay attention so that the holes for the number plates are in the front. And if you're doing this alone, I find it helpful to stand in the center of the rack, kind of rest the shelf on the top of the center support frame, and once you have the slotted hole aligned with the hole in the center of the frame, stick something like a screwdriver in that motherfucker to hold it in place while you go and install the shelf to the left and right support frames using 4 of those 12 long bolts and 2 of those thick steel oval spacer thingies. Again, hand tied on those for now also. So with a screwdriver in either one of these holes here holding the shelf in place on the center support bracket, you're going to move down to either end of the frame, and this is where you're going to use 2 of the longer bolts along with the oval spacer thing, and then of course on each bolt is going to have a washer on the back side and then a hand tightened nut. Do that on the left side and the right side, and that's it. Once those are in place, you can put 1 of the round head Allen screws into the open hole in the center of the shelf. A washer and a nut goes on the underside, hand tight. Then lastly, if you used a screwdriver to hold it in place earlier, remove that, put the other round head Allen screw in its place. Repeat the next steps for the next shelf, making sure to use the one with the slotted holes in the center, and of course paying attention so that the holes for the numbered plates are in front. Now you've got 3 shelves installed and you're ready for the top shelf. Now, this is the point where if you're building this thing alone, you're probably starting to realize that maybe you shouldn't have been such a dickhead to so many people for all those years, because it sure would be nice to have someone there to help you hold that thing in place while you put the remaining 4 long bolts and the last 2 still oval spacer thingies through the left and right sides of the frame into the dumbbell shelf. But you know what? Fuck them. If I can do this, so can you. But again, I'm not responsible if you drop this thing or smash your finger or whatever catastrophe you manage to get yourself into if you're unsuccessful. That's on you, man. So here's what worked for me. Before doing anything else, I put 2 of the remaining long bolts through their respective steel oval spacer thingies, and I put those through the holes at the top of 1 of the support frames. Doesn't matter which side, just make sure to leave the other side open or without bolts in it for the moment. I recommend you set your screwdriver near the center of the shelf or somewhere that you can easily reach it, as you're going to need that in just a minute. But for now, while holding the dumbbell shelf at the center and with the holes for the number plates toward the front, carefully lift the shelf into place, making sure to align the holes at the end of the shelf with the long bolts you left protruding from the frame. The shelf is heavy, so you're probably going to bump the bolts around a bit before you actually manage to fish one through the dumbbell shelf, and that's okay. The goal here is to get at least one of those bolts through the dumbbell shelf with enough bolt left over so that you can confidently divert your attention to sticking your screwdriver through one of the holes on the opposite frame that you left open or without bolts earlier. Okay, so you've got that secured, and at this point you can start pushing the bolts through the frame and the shelf and install a washer and of course hand tighten a nut on each one of those. Then you're going to remove your screwdriver so you can finally install the last of the long bolts and you're ready to tighten all of the bolts. Okay, to do that, you're going to want to grab your 9/16 inch socket, as all of the nuts are 9/16 of an inch. You're also going to need that 7/32 inch Allen wrench for the round head screws at the center support, as well as the flat head screws at the bottom right hand drawer. And the 5/16 inch Allen wrench will be used to tighten the rest of the bolts on the right and left of the frame. So Prime recommends tightening every bolt to 20 foot-pounds of torque, which is easy enough to gauge if you have a torque wrench, but if not, then on the international scale of hand tight to Jesus Christ, who tightened these fucking bolts, just go with the feel of pretty tight, okay? I like to tighten mine symmetrically as I go. For example, I might start at the bottom, tighten the center, then the left, then the right side, left side, repeat that as I work my way up. I'm not sure if that makes a damn bit of difference in an application like this, but in my mind, I'm fucking killing it. The last thing to install are the number plates. Use those stainless screws, nuts, and 7/16 inch socket to attach those to the rack, and you're done. That's it. Easy enough, right? Felt like a lot. Anyway, use code MWPIG5 at checkout or the link in the description below, and depending on what you buy, maybe you'll save money, maybe you won't, maybe fuck yourself, I don't know. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Do people ever actually like, comment, share, or subscribe just because someone told them to do so in an outro of a YouTube video? I don't know. I don't even know why I even